These are the biggest things that you need to know going into 2025 if you're going to run Google Ads for your e-com store. I'm going to cut to the chase on each topic and really go over the biggest algorithm changes and the different strategy changes that we're seeing going from 2024 to 2025 that's making the accounts we manage the most money. So number one is going to be that you can use shopping next to PMAX now. You can do this a little bit into the year 2024, but most of 2024, shopping and PMAX actually use the same placements. But what happened was if you're running them at the same time, they're basically competing against each other, which is never good in the world of Google Ads, right? But what's really, really nice is at the end, probably around like Q3 of 2024, Google actually separated the two campaign types. Now they have their own placements within shopping as an entire placement. Now, I know it might be a little hard to understand, but it's basically like allocations, right? Let's say if there's 100 allocated spots on shopping, 50 of them might go to PMAX and 50 of them might go to shopping. They're kind of split in that way. Now, that might not be exactly the split, right? But that's the idea of how it works. But the beauty of that is now you can actually scale out both of these different campaign types on top of each other. So whenever we have an account that we're running on Google Ads, 99% of the time, we're going to have the shopping campaign and the PMAX campaign scaling at the same time. Still, PMAX is generally going to dominate as far as the level of scale, but we're always happy, right, if we could squeeze out, let's say, another 20% of scale or 30% of scale using something like shopping, right? So highly encourage you, if you're trying to scale out your Google Ads account into 2025, make sure to experiment on both. You know, like we've talked about in other videos, there's different ways of executing each different type of strategy. On PMAX, you might be able to run what we call a catch-all, which is going to be everything together, and it might take off. You might need to break it off based off of the categories of products in your store. Same thing on shopping. Sometimes we have shopping campaigns that are exclusive to the best sellers of a store. It really depends on how many SKUs you have, right? Or they can be chopped up by category, they can be the top 15 products. Point being is that you're going to want to experiment and find out what works best for your store. And there will be one that takes off and yields you the most revenue. Next is going to be that YouTube campaigns are shifting entirely to demand gen. And this happened actually with shopping to PMAX, kind of going back to that first topic into when the transition happened. They actually tried to take out shopping entirely from Google Ads as the platform, but PMAX didn't function entirely how it should have. So what they did was they brought it back and then they kind of did it halfway, which like I talked about, they kind of shared those placements and then eventually they just had to split them again. So this could very well happen for what I'm talking about on the YouTube side. But as of now, they're entirely trying to remove YouTube campaigns, like traditional YouTube campaigns that you would build out the last year. And then they're going to shift entirely to demand gen. Now, the tricky thing about demand gen is that you're not going to be able to exclude different types of placements. You're kind of locked into different areas that your ad's going to show on Google, which in history of Google Ads isn't always the best thing, because usually the more freedom that Google has to spend your money, the less money you're going to make, the more money it's going to make then. That's why we always talk about keeping Google on a leash and making sure the segments are spending the money where it needs to be spent with different placements or different targeting. So like I said, it very likely could get to the point where demand gen just does not do the job. People are scaling down, Google's losing money, then they split the placements again. But as of now, it's going to go into demand gen. So that being said, if you're running YouTube campaigns and you get through that transition, make sure to keep a close eye on your demand gen campaigns, because what could happen is you might not see the same level of results because Google is going to have more control. That being said, if Google pulls it off and their algorithm comes in clutch, you might see really good results and maybe it just takes you farther. It's just one of the unknowns with these algorithm changes, but it's something that you're definitely going to want to pay attention to. And last is going to be that broad match targeting for PPC is coming back. Back in the day, you would not touch broad match targeting because it gave Google so much freedom of where they're going to show your ad based off of like synonyms, the term you're going to use, terms that are like the term that you use. I guess that's synonymous to synonym, but there's a lot of different ways that Google could show your ad based off the term that you're trying to target. And it would just burn through money and bring in really, really bad results. But just like everything, change can be good or bad. In this case, we actually like the change because using broad match generally allows you to scale farther, right? If you have more terms you can go after, it's going to allow the market to be, kind of enlarged for what you're going for. And because the algorithms got a lot stronger, you're able to now leverage it to do broad match targeting and see a lot more focused results because it's not only showing to people who are searching terms that are like the terms you're trying to target, but the biggest thing is it's fixated on people who are likely to convert, right? So whenever we're doing broad match targeting, we're always layering in some kind of algorithm type of bidding. So whether that's max conversions or like target CPA, for example, depending on your situation, one or the other might work well. Max conversions will scale farther, but TCPA is going to be a little bit more locked down and not going to spend the budget as freely. So a lot of times we'll start with TCPA and see what the campaign does. If we see that it's doing really well, but the scale is limited, then we'll test max conversions against it. And then if that scales farther, we'll kill off the TCPA and then take full market share with the max conversions on broad match keyword targeting. So really, really important. Always continue testing. Like I said, the last couple couple of years, phrase match targeting generally dominated phrase match with max conversion, but it has shifted. And because the algorithm has gotten a lot better, it's become a very powerful way to scale because you can go after these bigger markets and not worry about Google just destroying your budget. So all three of these topics are definitely top of mind for us when we're managing for our clients. Like we talked about the videos, we manage about 1.3 mil a month in Google ad spend for our ecom clients. So we're seeing actively the different things that are happening across different accounts, which lets us carry them all into individual accounts, kind of cut to the chase of what's working best. So even though those are top of mind for us and that's what we're seeing, likely it'll be what you see too. Make sure to always be careful and test in your own account because a lot of these things are very subjective to how they could kind of interact with different types of products in stores. Like I said, it should align with what you're going to see, but always test because the biggest thing is going to be the account data that's coming in on your end and what's going to make you the most money. So if you want more tips on what's working the best actively and also things you want to avoid that are not doing so well in the market, make sure to like and subscribe. We're constantly putting out videos talking about what we see every single day with the accounts that we manage.